Tony, thanks so much for joining us and to take the time to talk to us. I have prepared a few questions for you from our readers. You've often explained some parts of the details of why it is so important that Lange does the assembly of every mechanical movement twice. And there's, I think, a lot of little details that many people don't necessarily understand or know why it is so important, why it is so much work. Could you explain it again for them?
Yes, I think it's good to explain a little bit because a second assembly is very common in the industry. As a watchmaker, you do that because especially with complications. The complications you need to adjust. So you're putting in a spring as a watchmaker and the one half of the mechanism and the other half need to cooperate perfectly together. And you assemble it and it's not functioning well. You take out the spring, it reduces a little bit the thickness of the spring and you set it again. And that happens maybe 20 times. And the adjustment of gear trains, especially how complicated the movement is, the more you build it, you assemble it and deassemble it. So that is very common in the industry, complications. But because we work in the whole collection, so the whole price range, with non-treated German silver, which is very delicate, we have chosen that is the best way for us to standardize. Because normal other companies, when they use standard manual movements or automatic movement, they don't need to do a double assembly. Because it's not so, you know, most of the plates are rhodium plated, and so that's a better kind of a protection of the material. We use you know, the non-treated German silver, which is very sensitive to fingers. Even so that as soon as you touch it with your finger, you can't wipe it away. You have to polish it away or cut it away. It goes into it's oxidation. So you need very aggressive stuff to clean, to get your fingerprint away. So that is one of the main reasons. And the reason is why we communicate that, because we are probably the only ones that have to do this in the entire range of products, not only the complications, but also the entry level watches.
And that takes quite a lot of time, of course.
Double time.
I remember that you explained it also several times, that suppose you have to grind off a little part to make it fit.
Yeah.
Small parts get into the movement. You need to clean that, of course. And that's also a reason to take it apart and put it together. Yeah,
for example, I have a spoon here because I don't have watch parts and it would be too small for the camera. But if you take this as a lever and at the end of a spring, this is a spring, for example, at the end of the spring, there's the contact with the lever. This end of this part is polished because we call that the function area. And there's a tiny little drop of grease. What happens if you assemble first? You fix everything, you try. And you have to take it apart because it's not working properly. You take it apart. There's grease here. There's grease here. And after 3-4 times, there's grease everywhere. You need to clean it before, because we want to sell a new watch, not a second or third hand watch. So the watchmaker leaves it as it is. The function is working. After the first assembly, he let the watch run for a couple of days, because the gear trains need to get, let's call it, used together. Einlaufen, we call that. And then everything goes smoother. Then he takes everything apart and he puts it in the cleaning machine and then assembles again. And then in a proper way.
Okay. How long does a relatively standard assembly, that second assembly, take, for instance, for a Lange 1?
Now, if the watchmaker has built the movement first assembly and it's running, when he takes it apart, he's, for example, giving the 3/4 plate, all the gold chatons and everything goes out, and he's giving the 3/4 plate to a colleague. Who is doing the glassrooter striping, because that's then done afterwards. So that takes a little bit of time. And everything else goes in the cleaning machine. And then he has the parse, for the final assembly. That depends a little bit. and that's due to the hand craftsmanship. It depends a little bit. I don't know exactly how long it takes, a day, 1.5, to assemble. What we used to do, from my experience is, when I did that, you build that, you assemble that the second time very proper, very clean and everything. It cost you more than 1 day, but the first evening you try to get the movement ticking without all the other functions, to let it run overnight, to check it in the morning if it's still good, and then continue your story. It depends a little bit. Could be a day or two, if he's lucky. Or sometimes you're not lucky, and then you take 3 or 4 days. That's the thing. That's if you ask my buddy Tino to plan manufactory, it sounds like a mission impossible. It's of course not. There is some guidings and guidelines and so on, but it is really true. And that starts with coming back with my spoon, the finishing of a little spring with beveling here. It could be that it takes 20 minutes to do a spring, and it could be that it takes half an hour or maybe 50 minutes. That depends a little bit. It's human.
Well, the thing is, of course, there are either 150 or sometimes up to 300-400 parts in a movement.
Yeah.
And each part there can be a little setback or something that's just works brilliant. And that makes quite a range of possibilities, I guess. Now moving on, for instance, to one of the novelties of this year is Lange 1 QP, the Perpetual Calendar. First time we see it in a normal Lange 1 with a Perpetual Calendar, so without a tourbillon. And in the expert talk we just did, you mentioned it was not a simple Lange 1, take out the tourbillon and leave the QP. How much work did it take to create this movement?
There are two aspects. First of all, we don't like just pulling out a tourbillon and go ahead. That's not us. Secondly, I think it's very important that if we planned the watch from 2017, we started the project. One of the reasons was when we launched the Lange 1 tourbillon Perpetual Calendar in 2012, many said, "Oh man, this is the Perpetual Calendar. It's almost a pity that there's a tourbillon inside because it's out of my range." And there had a lot of collectors say, "Hey, if you make this without a tourbillon, please, I will be the first." And what we do and how we work, and that's not only with this project, with all the projects. We did it with triple split. We do this always. It's also a point of respect towards the people in the assembly department, because they are finally the experts. You know, we develop, for example, in 2010, we've launched the Daymatic. That was the first Lange 1 with automatic movement. We launched it in 2010. In 2017, we had a meeting with the watchmakers who have built the Daymatic during 7 years. And we said, okay, if you were about to create a new Daymatic, what would you change due to your experience? Because these guys have been building day in, day out for 7 years that watch. And we did the same meeting with the two watchmakers who were responsible for the Lange 1 tourbillon Perpetual Calendar. And we told them we plan to do without a tourbillon, and we want to integrate the day and night indications in the moon phase to clean up the dial even more, to highlight even more the typical Lange 1 design, give it even more importance. Like we did last year with the time zone. The time zone that last year is way cleaned up, more Lange 1 than the first generation. And that is a thing we do. You can call it never stand still, but it's a logical thinking. We learn of sometimes our mistakes and sometimes the bad things. And what interesting was that the both, and I can, if you want, I can show you an image. I can share my screen, I think, and show you, for example, 3 movements. So there you are, Chuck. You see the movements?
Yes.
And you see my pointer?
Yeah.
Okay, the movement on the left, that is the original Daymatic. The movement on the right is the tourbillon. And the movement in the middle is the new Lange 1 Perpetual. The only thing we kept in place is the beautiful rotor, because we love that so much. For me personally, that's the most beautiful automatic rotor in the industry. I love it so much, the depth, and it's really gorgeous. So I said, oh, can we keep this? And the other, yeah, we like it. So we don't do that extra stuff. But what did we change is, and that is the case, and that's why I'm showing these three movements. The Daymatic, you see my pointer, it starts from the barrel to the center wheel, because that area is where our minute hand are, and then it continues to the balance wheel, but yeah, escape wheel and balance wheel. The funny bloke over here, that is a second hand. That's an extra wheel separated from the gear train. What you call this an indirect driven second hand, which means there's one gear extra, and that the gear is not flattery, the second hand not flattery, a little friction spring to make the movement of the second very nice. The same, or even worse, I could say, in the tourbillon. Due to the integration of the tourbillon, we had to be very creative. The gear train comes here and goes here, partly over the tourbillon, and even 2 extra gears are made for the second hand. Each gear, we talk about a loss of energy of 10% around. So you have -% energy, 10% energy, and you have a little spring also for the friction spring. So it's even more. So in fact, that highlights even more the enormous complexity we had in the Lange 1 tourbillon perpetual calendar. Many people say, oh, they integrated the tourbillon. You just put the balance wheel in a cage and there you go. No, because the cage is also extra weight, although it's hyper light. So these two groups of watchmakers told us, if you can, they work well, but also to ease out regulating for us and have more reserve in your power, is it not possible to integrate the second hand directly in the gear train? And that's what we did here. Here's the second hand wheel. So no need for a friction spring, no need for extra stuff. We have adapted, so the movement on the left, the Daymatic is more or less the base of the new caliber. And then we've adapted, not the rotor, but the gears between the rotor and the somewhat stronger mainspring is here. We have completely changed the automatic winding gear.
Looks like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just wish for a little bit of plug and play, or?
No. Because, you know, the point is, as a developer, it's always cool to have these projects because you learn so much from doing such a project as this. You use the learnings for other crazy projects. Like, for example, I don't think we ever could have made the tight work without doing the Lange 31, because challenge was on the Lange 31 for the power reserve and the constant force was to create a constant force remontoire system. And you know where the idea comes from, the remontoire system? From the main clock in the Stamhouse. We have in the Stamhouse, we have a huge clock.
Yeah, I know.
And there is a remontoire system inside. It's a bit different, but that gave us the inspiration to do, wait a minute, for the Lange 31, maybe if we do a remontoire system which recharges every 10 seconds, we could do. We changed that in the tight work, not every 10 seconds, but every minute. That was the solution. So that's an example of learning, and we are constantly learning because at the moment we're working on 15 movement designs at the same time. Don't worry, we're not going to launch them all next year.
Good
but
thing,
we have
thank you.
No. But if you just bear in mind that we worked almost 8 years for the development of the Grand Complication, you know that we need a planning, because we prefer to launch the watches when they are ready.
Yeah.
I always say we were prototypes, not the client.
That's a good thing. But Tony, you've been at Lange Söhne for almost 17 years now.
Yeah.
And I remember that the first watch you had to work on was the Lange 31. Quite an achievement to get that done. But of all those calibers you've created in the past almost 17 years, which is the one that stands out the most to you for the technical challenges?
For the technical challenges, and I think to also motivate the team and to get a know-how, I think is the grand complication, because that was a milestone for us, because I had some experience building Grand Sonneries and minute repeaters from Switzerland, but it's not a typical Glashütte thing. It's not also historically seen a Glashütte thing. Although I found it very important for a brand like Lange Söhne to have the knowledge, to gather that knowledge internally. So we do these things internally. It could have been very easy for me to just ring a phone call to Giulio Papi, my friend, and say, can you help us and integrate your beautiful minute repeater mechanism into a datograph? It would be no point. But that's not the point here. I think it's not only the responsibility or my responsibility to prepare the brand concerning watch timepieces for the future, but also prepare for to extend the know-how. So we had a lot of things. I always call these fields, you know, a field luminous, a field handwerkskunst, where our creative people can really flip out, you know. And normally you are quite understated. We had that discussion this morning, because normally we have understated watches, but you have highly skilled and creative people. And they told me years ago, hey, Tony, I want to show my engravement. I want to show what we're capable of. And then we created a kind of platform called Handwerkskunst. For sometimes you do these flamboyant things, which actually not quite fit in the normal brand DNA, but you have to do that because it's interesting and it builds. So enamel dial, so all these fields, and technically I think still was a grand complication, but that was more in point of the striking mechanism. You know, I can't mention you one, because the Lange 31 sidework thing, and later with that idea we had the Richard Lange jumping second with its zero reset, or a stoppable tourbillon cage, which sounds everything very logic, and just say, stop a tourbillon. Everybody says it's for precision, but until 2008, it was not possible for the client to check the precision, because you could not stop and set the watch like you should be. That was a tricky thing, but there are so many aspects of my job. That's what it makes so interesting. So,
like a kid with a lot of Lego.
Oh, yes. It's a kid in the chocolate store. I can't choose.
Chocolate even. Or ice cream for you.
I
know. But another question that's quite close to this, actually. One of the things that always stands out with Lange watches, especially with the chronographs, is the incredibly beautiful architecture of the movement. And it's not just the architecture, but it's the entire design, in which you can see that all the different finishes are positioned in such a nice way, in such a beautiful way, that it almost becomes a piece of art. Much more than, sorry for the competitors, but much more than with any of the competitors, the Lange chronographs stand out incredibly. Do you guys and your team, do you guys start with having this in mind, that the overall design and the positioning of the different finishes all over the movement have to create a beautiful composition together?
Yes, I think the goal is, of course, first to make it work. It helps. Secondly, the architecture, the positioning, as far as you can change that. And the third of all is, of course, to the shape of the bridges and everything. And I must say, I'm very proud of the team of the movement designers, because each of them are doing that. They came with, and sometimes we discuss, of course, it's a team, but they show up with, look, I have this shape and I'm not sure. What do you think? And this and that. And we look at it. We go so much. It's a very nerdy thing, actually. We go so much in deep. But it's also the fun. But they over the years they get a good hang over it to do that, and it's really cool. They come up with ideas. They over and over they surprise us again about what it's. I mean, it's always in harmony, and it is a tricky thing to make things work, but also try to show as much also from the mechanism.
That's it, indeed. And especially, for instance, with a triple split, that must have been so complex to create that movement and to make it look good.
Yeah, the risk always is, and that is as well with the triple split, as well also with the Lange one Perpetual Calendar, is that you have, with the double split, we have a full functioning, good working movement. And then you say, let's integrate, or let's use this as base of the triple split. And then you start to intervene in a harmonious mechanism, and you start to change things, and there's a severe risk things don't go anymore. But you still want to keep that identity of double split, you want to keep in place. But you want to create news around it. That's a bit of a tricky thing. It's the same with the Lange one Toolview Perpetual Calendar. You could have said, just put the day and night indicator from there to there and integrate it in the moon. That's easy. Not so easy, because you need to create space to make the gear to that point. But how you fix it, because where you need to fix the new gear, there is other gear from the calendar. You need to take that away and find your wind around. And that is a puzzle. That is a dangerous puzzle. By solving one problem, creating 17 others without knowing.
It sounds like an incredible challenge, to be honest.
But it's our job, just to maybe
job, but far from a standard job. Let's put it that way. Anthony, one of the things that we can see when we look at all the presentations of the Watches and Wonders novelties across the board, there's quite a lot of time-only watches that are being launched and being cheered. How is that with Lange Söhne? Because from my perspective, I mainly see complications coming from Lange Söhne.
I think we did, if you look back last year, we did also quite of time-only watches, or the Saxonia outsize date we launched. It's certainly not a goal, let's do complication. What we do try is once a year do a highlight like a new movement, and that can be a complication. But also to do other things on other levels, because it's not everybody's wallet who allows to buy a complication. So you need to offer things on different levels. And I think for us, it's quite a colorful year. We don't participate in the 50 Shades of Green, but but we have for Lange meanings, it's quite colorful. The reason why we did do the triple split in pink gold with blue dial was the first triple split was quite technical, white gold with a gray dial, and you know, it's not because these decisions are taken a couple of years ago, because you need to order prototypes and look at it and things and like that. And we have several executions, and the product team is making a choice, and we like this. And also because this is the biggest contrast of the first generation of these watches. And maybe that's also a little bit, that's also a bit of the case with the Lange 1 Perpetual, because we wanted to differentiate at first glance that, of course, from the tourbillon version, which is a completely different watch and a different pair of shoes. And the copper blue little Lange 1, that is just a sweetie. That comes from, you know, we did Saxonia thin with copper blue, a huge success. We were overwhelmed, like, oh my God. And actually, we already planned to do, but if that works, maybe we could do it in the Lange 1, because that is Lange 1. Now, yeah, there she is. So all came together. So
looking very good. But is it also that maybe clients of Lange Söhne are more focused on the complications, mainly because of the incredibly beautiful movements?
It's difficult to answer. Because I also divided? I also know some collectors who really appreciate the understatement of the design, and they say, hey, I have my Saxonia thin. I can wear it every suit. It's elegant, and it's my timepiece. Nobody sees that it's an expensive watch or a complicated watch. And that's so cool about this. Actually, there's also quite cool on the Lange 1 Perpetual, because at first sight, it doesn't look like a classical perpetual calendar with all the, but it's a highly complicated watch, and I'm allowed to wear the prototype. I'm so proud. I'm really happy with the watch. But it's still, at first glance, it's the Lange 1. But there's more, you know, and that is maybe discussed this morning also. It's interesting that discreet, understated at the front, and you turn it around, your show opens only for you. And if you want to share it, you share it. But yet you are the one who decides if you want to share it or not. And there are many people who do not understand. So these nerdy guys with these movements, okay. Lange is a collector's brand. If you're ready to pay 16,000, 70,000 euros for a watch with two hands, then you must be a collector. Because Lange Söhne, nobody heard of, only the collectors or the high-end watchmaking fans. So you don't buy I don't think you buy that to show off.
No, that's exactly. It's for those in the know.
Yeah, for those in the know, exactly.
It could be showing off, but on the other hand, this is I think a community that's more on the appreciative side of things. I think you're very lucky with such a fan base. It's
very lucky. And I prefer almost to use the word family, because in fact, what we do now is sharing the passion, because we have so many the people in the company. We work with passion. We've been several times in the factory, and it is like that. And it was also the moment when I came first at Lange. I was also very much surprised to the passion of the people, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is different. Things happen here, and that's why I'm proud on the people and being one of the colleagues, because that's what it is. My face, you see my face, and I'm sitting in front of the camera and do funny things, but at the end it's a teamwork, and everybody, not only the developers, but also the people in the manufacturing, or the people in marketing who do a magnificent job this week to get everything done and nice movies and all the stuff. That's cool. That is a machine. It's a gear train. It's a movement. And we need all the wheels. Otherwise, the timekeeping goes off.
Thanks for those very clever words.
Wow, clever, spontaneous.
Well, sounded very good, especially within the watchmaking realm. Anthony, thank you so much.
Frank, as always, has been a great pleasure. And again, I hope we can meet very soon. And not very soon. I mean, very soon. Yeah, okay. Soon. Okay, Frank. Take care. Stay healthy.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye. Bye.